You were talking about you're on the hunt for another pup.
Yep.
What's going on there?
So that's still staying on the idea path of the Drahthaar, the initial dog that I wanted to get. But at the time, I knew I wanted to get a dog that fall, and so I picked up Pinion for a just crazy good deal. And now I'm just like putting little pieces of paychecks away in the bank for the next one. And so I've been researching breeders right and left and talking to a lot of folks and just doing my due diligence in that front. And so I found a breeder that I want to work with, been chatting with her quite a bit. And I have a puppy set to come out of a litter. I think they're whelped next February.
Mm-hmm.
So the breed will be, or the litter will be born in February, I believe. And then I'll be able to pick it up late spring, early summer, and have a summer full of training with it and be able to launch it next season. But yeah, I'm going to go for a Drahthaar.
That'll be good timing. So why that breeder? What was it that you said, okay, this is where I'm getting my dog from?
A lot of it was understanding the past of the breeder, her work of like, from what I heard, just like from the time she was like a young kid, like working with her father as he trained police dogs, and she would like go out there and teach them basic obedience and training. And so she's got over 30 years of training experience. I like her personality. I like the dogs. The dogs all have really good scores. The bitch that's going to be in the breed has like almost perfect scores across the board. And then she's actually sending that dog to Belgium to be bred. So I'm taking a little bit of a gamble on the whole idea of line breeding. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a one-off breeding, but I've chatted with so many people and I get difference of opinions back and forth about line breeding versus one-time breeding. And just, I don't know, like I'm not convinced either way. So I like the looks of both of the dogs, the style of the hunting that she does. I'm really interested in like diving more into the chucker scene, and that's kind of her specialty out in Idaho. But then as well as having just kind of that overall Drahthaar, that fin to feather or that fur to feather sort of mentality. They just do it all. Like I really like that.
That is not an uncommon thing to hear about Drahts. When I interview somebody, it's a specific kind of breed that appeals to a specific kind of person, and and they can be badass. It's interesting to hear you talk about this breeder heading overseas, going to breed in Belgium, hearing that she comes from a family where there was training of, German Shepherds, I'm assuming German Shepherds, police dogs, maybe Malinois or whatever. But it's generally when you're looking for a dog like that's not that popular. It's not the lab, it's not the golden retriever. It's something that you just can't find anywhere. A lot of times when you find that good breeding, like you're talking about, or you find that like breeder you're comfortable with, they're doing work with somebody in Germany or France or the UK, or they're dealing in that European scene where the breed standards are crazy high.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that's, so you talked about Pinion, your current dog, being a hell of a deal. You can get that. You can get lucky that way. But now the next thing you're doing is you're going to spend a bunch more money with somebody who's really invested in that breeding process. And it is not a cheap deal to get a dog in from Europe or to go over and have a dog bred. Like you're talking some overhead on those puppies. But that in a lot of ways is the best way to hedge your bets for having a killer dog.
Yeah. I caution myself on talking to a lot of folks about how lucky I got with my dog and like really going for that blue collar, like no paper dog. Cause you can get some like real wild cards out there. But I got really lucky with him. And like I mentioned, that's just kind of like a homage to like my old man and how he did things. Mm-hmm. I wanted my first real bird dog to be that way. But yeah, this next dog is definitely my investment. It's like, I'm learning all of my quirks and like figuring out all of the ways that I like mess up this dog so I don't mess up the big dog. So, and the other thing that I really like about the Drahthaar that I failed to mention is the blood tracking aspect. Mm-hmm. Like out here, for me in Montana, it's all about elk bugles and bird dogs. So when I'm out elk hunting, I've heard a ton of horror stories about folks losing elks, losing the blood trail after they shoot them. So I'm really excited about taking this dog and like really teaching it how to blood track. And that's one of the benefits of her line as well, as her dog Delta is an amazing tracker. And so that was a big part of me choosing this litter.
Yeah. They're pretty well known for being game recovery dogs. Good at it. And that is something that's, we're finally really catching on in the States for having, you see more and more states allowing it. And, it's one of those just dumb laws. I know Meateater did a piece on dumb hunting laws, and not allowing game recovery dogs is silly. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so that'll be a cool experience for you.
Yeah. And it's funny that you talk about the Germany, like the way they do things over there, like it's like against the law to not find game. It's like, I don't know if it's law to have a game recovery dog, but it is highly encouraged to have one. And that's why it's so beneficial to get some bloodlines from over there, where it's just like, that's the standard.
Well, it's a different, for sure that's true, but it's also the view of a dog's role is different in a lot of places over there, where it's like, yeah, this dog is a game recovery dog, and it's an upland hunter, and it's this and it's that. And we struggle with that here in the States a little bit, because we think like, oh, I'm a pheasant hunter, I want a pheasant dog. And like when you get a good dog and you start traveling a little bit, you're like, well, I don't want my dog just to be a pheasant dog, because there's quail out there and there's Sharpies, and now I'm running into Huns, and I want my dog to do all kinds of stuff. And then you say, I love to elk hunt, or I love to whitetail hunt. And once in a while they get shot in the guts, and it sucks, and it's very hard to recover them. And if I can use a dog to recover them, like we've had Jeremy Moore on this podcast, and Jeremy is really good at training game recovery dogs. And when you dig in with him, man, the success rate is for a mortally wounded dog, or a deer, not talking the shoulder hit thing where you don't know. It's high, man. I mean, it's a no-brainer. If you want to protect that resource and get the most out of that big game resource, those dogs are a no-brainer, and they can handle that and every other job you ask of them. Yep.
Yeah. It's just such a do-it-all, like in the weeds sort of grunt dog. I love the idea of it. So I'm really looking forward to going out and just a dog that I can take out whatever I'm doing here in Montana or wherever I'm going. Like you mentioned, like I can just take it out and it's going to excel. It's going to learn, and it's going to step up to the job.
Yep. So that's, I meant to ask you this before and I forgot. We went off on a different way, but you keep talking about your dad and his strategy is get a dog, take it hunting, and so we wouldn't advise that on a surface level. We would say train your dog. We just would, but you can't ignore, a sporting breed knows how to hunt, like if you go pick up any number of sporting breeds, they know they like the scent of a pheasant and they want to follow it. Like that's not, you don't have to train them for that, or a chucker or whatever. A game bird walks through the grass, they like it, but we don't put them in enough situations a lot of time to get really good out there and get comfortable in the new environments and this dynamic changing world that they're in. And so that training method sounds kind of funny, because you're like, well, I don't really train them. We just take them out and let them go. That's a huge component of having a good bird dog.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's my mentality of it is like, I went out and went to a bunch of different training seminars and training sessions out here, but it ended up, my dog just ended up catching all the like quail or the pen raised quail and all of that. I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not teaching my dog anything I want him to learn. So I pulled him back from that. And all I'm doing right now, as far as training, is just working and honing in the basic obedience.
Yep.
And then I'm letting him do all of his learning in the field as far as bird dogs. And like, if he kicks up and he chases a covey and it gets up and he doesn't point, that's bad on him. And he's going to learn that. It's going to suck for me for a while until he learns that. But that's really how I want to get him to tune in. And I'll work on some steadiness to pointing and just making sure that he's got a little bit of that. But I really want him to learn in the field. Taking kind of like some chops from Benno Williams over in Livingston. And I really like his philosophy on bird dogs.
Yep. So that idea of, I'm working on obedience with him, and I'm providing these opportunities to learn on wild birds in the field. That is like the dirty little secret of most trainers. Like that's, I shouldn't say that the obedience thing is so huge. And that's where the training comes in. You want a dog that's just in control. If your dog's taking off and it's running toward a highway, you want to be able to stop that sucker and turn him around. I mean, it's simple. When he's in the house and the mailman comes up to the door, you want to be able to control that dog. When you're in the field, it's just like us, like you talked about elk hunting. If you want to be a good elk hunter, you're going to go screw up on elk constantly. Most of your encounters you're going to screw up, and that's how you become better. A bird dog's no different. A bird dog doesn't know the ins and outs of wild roosters in the late season in the cattail slough until it hunts wild roosters in the late season in the cattail sloughs a whole bunch. Then they get better. And so if you provide that opportunity and you have some control over them, that's how you get a dog that's crazy good. And this is something that I've got into once in a while with people where it's very easy to say you can't run into enough wild birds to hone a dog into what they need to be. And I don't think that's true. I think it's true if you live in certain places and, if your life is not conducive to getting out there a lot. I understand that. But you can get into an awful lot of wild bird situations in places you don't expect and really get that dog on a lot of opportunities if you make the effort to find them.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I understand there's a lot of folks that maybe live in cities and there's no way like before work or after work is a thing, but just being able to wrap some like weekend opportunities around camping or what have you up in the mountains or out in the prairies and just wrapping some lifestyle adventure around like getting your dog out there and getting its nose on birds.
Yep.
There's some certain ways you can do it. And in the meantime, when you can't do that, just keep work on that obedience.
Yep.
Like I'm building out a training table in my backyard and really getting things prepped for the summertime, the end of summer into fall to just do that. Like I'm certainly going to want to go out in the mornings and chasing huns around, but when I'm not, I'm going to be sitting there and working on them. Like Pinion's big deal right now is fetching. And so that's the main thing I want to work on him with. He hates it with a passion. Like his avoidance to fetch is incredible. So we're going to be butting heads against that for a while.
Oh, well, he's got to have it,
Yeah, I mean, it's important.
they always, there's no perfect bird dog out there. They always have a hole in their game somewhere that you got to work on with them, and I had a fellow reach out to me through our website, emailed me, and he's running labs and he's new to hunting, but he wants to teach them, like, what do I teach my dogs to hunt? And he wants to duck hunt. And I'm like, steadiness, man. Like you need dogs that are steady because you got a lab. It's probably going to want to retrieve. Like the natural retrieve, natural hold and carry in a decent lab is pretty solid. You don't usually have to do too much work with that, but the steadiness thing, like getting them to sit there while all the action happens and not run out ahead of you and not jump out of the boat. That's the unnatural hard part that you got to work on with them. And so like when you say that about your dog, it's like, yeah, that's just the hole in his game and you got to get on it,
Just got to grind through it.
Yep. That's just how it works, man. Tell me a little bit about what you're doing at Meateater, because I've kind of looked at, I've been writing for Meateater for a little while now and doing some stuff with you guys, and I was kind of brought in for some of the deer stuff and some of the bird dog stuff and the upland stuff, but you seem to be your role seems to be this upland guy.
A bit to it for the forward facing aspect, yeah. Like I came in and I'm the quintessential upland guy here, the token upland guy in the office. Like I've lived my life to kind of, it's an old like Yvon Chouinard quote of like being an 80%er. Like there's so many cool things out there in the world to do. And I kind of live that philosophy, but like the core, like true aspect of myself is upland hunting. Like I was walking the fields with a single shot shotgun with a hammer action, like when I was like tripping over Milo stalks as a kid. And so that's just kind of like my core upbringing. So I'm taking on that role here as well as a lot of behind the scene kind of technical nerdy stuff with the website and dialing a lot of that aspect in. That's no fun to talk about.
So how much, I know that you're starting to produce some content, around the upland thing. I mean, is that going to be part of your role going forward there?
Yep, absolutely. So right now we just launched, it's getting rolled out right now. So I went around to a bunch of different trainers over the spring and early summer, and we're rolling out an 8-part or 9-part little series on Instagram on our account of just little DIY bird dog training tips for things you can do in your backyard with minimal gear. And so
Mhm.
that's being rolled out right now, and just kind of testing the waters with some of that and seeing kind of what works and just readjust based on the metrics.
Yeah,
So,
it's a crazy. We live in a crazy content creation world now.
oh yeah.
There's no anybody who's following Meateater knows there's no end to the content you can create and that you have to create to just stay relevant. And it's so vastly different than it was 10 years ago. It's interesting because you can find so much good stuff now, and really get some interesting and quality education on these topics. But it is like a many-headed monster.
Oh yeah, and the variety of ways you can create content, the different platforms you create it for, and how do you distribute it and display it? It's wild.
Yeah, it's nuts. So what's it like with being in that office these days on a daily basis? Because there is nothing out there like the Meateater empire right now.
It is. So I stepped into the company in October this last year, and it's been a full-on fire hose effect for the vast majority of the time. Learning a ton here, but it's been great. We pulled a lot of great people from the industry to come work over here, and as we build this out, and the fun thing is like we're not playing by anybody's playbook. We're making this new Meateater up as we go, and kind of like really like going into some uncharted waters. So it's been really exciting. And learning from a lot of bright people.
It's a cool thing to witness because, like you said, you obviously Meateater is sponsored depending on what you're talking about, the show, the podcast, whatever. But the content I've been involved in creating so far, and I'm paying attention to the other stuff too. It's like a return to journalism. Like, Spencer's been my main editor. He's like sources, find sources, cite sources. And so it's like, it's back to, some different magazines I write for, they ask for that stuff. Some don't, just depends. But it's been very consistent that let's find an issue worth exploring, find people on both sides, and really dig into it with a bend toward journalism. And it's for me, it's a pain in the ass because I'm used to some easier stuff, but at the same time, it's so much more fulfilling to dig into these topics and actually have to reach out to experts. And it's like, it's a breath of fresh air to see when you know how some of the content is being generated, what's pushing the ideas behind it. So it's cool to see.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be a part of the team, and like everything that you've said there, it's amazing to like not have anybody lean on us for what we're supposed to be doing. Like, we want to tackle a subject that's going to be controversy, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it right. We're going to make sure it's thought out through and through.
Yeah,
so.
And even then, you're going to get people mad at you, as I can attest, because I wrote an e-collar piece not too long ago and laid out the pros and cons from some industry experts on it, and it was one of those topics where you knew people were going to get fired up, and you knew you were just going to make a lot of enemies on both sides, and boy, I did. So
you get some nice letters in the inbox for that one.
Yeah, and that sometimes doing what I do, doing what you do, like, these topics are worth diving into, even though you're going to get the hate mail. Like, on the other side of things, like if I write about CWD, there's no way to win that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and actually we see it to some extent in the dog world. If I start to talk too much about labs, people get mad at me because they like GSPs and I get it. Or if like you make one random comment about, like, well, golden retrievers seem to kind of be this way. Man, sometimes people come out of the woodwork, and I'm okay with that because I want an audience that's passionate about this stuff. Like it would be, it's a different thing when we do something like for Meateater where we're exploring an issue like that and you're going to piss people off. I can write hunting features for magazines all day long and never get a letter. You know what I mean? Like they're just like safe, vanilla, and they can serve a good purpose. They can be entertaining, they can be educating, but they're not like tweaking. And it's like there's a weird thing to that where you don't want to be like a clickbaity, shit stir just for the hell of it. Like you want to get people thinking, and some of those people
conversation.
Exactly. Like some of them you hope are thinking like, okay, I never heard this guy's perspective, this interview source perspective on e-collars or whatever, and to get you to think about the issues a little more.
Yep. Yeah. And it goes back to that idea that I just mentioned of just like the engage in the conversation, getting people kind of stirred up a little bit and like having to take a look at the other side instead of being so set in stone on their own ways. So
yeah, it's cool to see a guy like you come into that place, because I've always looked at, not always, but I've looked at the Meateater thing with Steve, and it's like I've always felt a little left out as a bow hunter and a bird hunter. And I know that he's done some stuff to reach both. And, you guys got Kenyon in the office, and there's obviously it's a growing, entity, but I think you're going to see the bird hunters and the bird dog owners and the working dog owners go, yes, thank you. More content, please. More content. Because they're not it's not the same thing. The pheasant hunters or upland hunters or waterfowl hunters, numbers wise, they don't really compete with the deer hunters, but they're super into it. Like generally, they're passionate about the hunting side, and on the general side, they're passionate about their dog ownership. And it's a cool thing to be able to reach an audience like that. Yeah. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to like streamlining that process here and kind of like taking the flag of that and spread the voice for that for those folks out there. So I've gotten a lot of good feedback from folks, whether they're kind of friends that I've made over at Pheasants Forever or just random folks in the upland community across the board. Some of the posts that I've been putting up, I've gotten a lot of good praise, and it's cool to see that support and see that people want that. Yeah. The bird dog thing and the upland market, the members of the media involved in it, it's such a different kind of deal than the big game world. Like it's, like I say this all the time, but I'm like, there's no trophy pheasants, like you don't kill booner chuckers, like when you take that kind of ego thing out of it, where like, or when you take the potential to invoke a lot of ego and get rolled up in the hubris, when that's set aside, then you have this, like, in some ways more generally pure pursuit where you're like, okay, why am I here now? Like, what am I here for? And it's the dogs and the experience. And, don't get me wrong. I love crunching wild roosters and mallards and all kinds of stuff. Like, I like that part. I like to shoot them. I like to eat them. I love watching my dog do the whole thing, but it becomes a different thing, and it's so fun to be a part of. Yeah. And it's also like the miles that you walk, you don't see a single bird, and the dog is just kind of off doing his thing. And you're just like, you're like deep into your mind and like a philosophy mindset as you like walk through the hills. And that depth of thought that I get from upland hunting is something that I really cherish.